I am the Professional Development Director for the association. And if this is your first time attending the Power Hour series, welcome. And if you've attended previous ones, welcome back. We developed our Power Hour series to connect with industry experts and a place to cultivate professional development skills. Our Power Hours are on Mondays at the 10 o'clock hour, so thank you for starting off your week with us today and learning CMA 3 ways. Before I introduce our speaker, we also have Heather Thompson joining us today, and she is the Executive Director for our Realtor Foundation of Wake County. Heather, are you there?
I'm right here, girl. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you guys quickly. I'm from Nash County, so I talk very fast. I am Heather, the Executive Director of the foundation, and it's your foundation. So again, it says Realtor Foundation, and that gives you all a chance to know that the good works we're doing out in the community, the nonprofits we're partnering with to transition folks from homelessness to stable housing in well-equipped homes like you all have, all the comforts of home. We're doing that again in the name of Realtors. And nonprofits are starting to look to us for support. Just last week, best part of my job, we gave away $13,000 to 4 local housing nonprofits in desperate need of good old general operating money. Okay, so now I'm going to make my acting debut. Okay, ready? Guys, this is huge. We're in a hurry, we're in a panic, we're in a rush. It's a September stampede to stop homelessness. Between now and September 30th, we're trying to collect all the money we can. That money is going to go right back out to the community. So just like the housing market, we're in a hurry. So below in the chat, I'm going to give you a text number, $5, $10, anything. It's going to go a long way. And thank you for the opportunity this morning, and I'm going to end my career now. Thank you.
I love it, Heather. Y'all are doing such great things. Thank you. So today we are excited to have Lynne Brid with us, and she's going to teach us all about CMAs. Lynn is the Computer Training Center and TMLS Training Manager, and she has served TMLS for 22 years, so y'all are in for a treat. Lynn teaches Paragon topics such as searches, results, the Collab Center, listing input, preference settings, and she can also do trainings for your office. Lynn is a great resource and a wonderful instructor. So Lynn, I'm going to let you take it away.
Thank you, Mary Rachel. Good morning, everybody. I'm so happy to be here with you for Power Hour. This is exciting for me. And I just wanted to let you know that today I will be talking about 3 different resources that you have available to you right now to create a comp analysis. There are more, and we'll talk about those at another time. You can come back for a class on some of those. But yeah, today I want to talk about 3 things that you have available. We'll start with Paragon. That's your MLS system. We'll look at some quick CMAs. We'll also look at the more enhanced CMA. We will also look at Realist. Realist is your tax information system, and we'll take a look there. And then we'll wrap up with RPR, Realtors Property Resource. And that's the National Association of Realtors database that they've put together and you have access to because of your membership to NAR. So let's get started. Let me share my screen. So I'm going to start here in Paragon. One of the things that you may or may not have used is the CMA Wizard presentation. It lets you do a more enhanced or full-blown, if you will, presentation for when you need that, but there's also some just kind of overview reports that I want to share with you as well. First, so I want to look at the preferences and defaults that you can put in place if you decide that you want to use this enhanced CMA. So I'm going up to my menu bar, and I'm going to click on the Preferences menu, and then over to the right, I'm going to click on CMA Preferences Wizard. And this is just a step-by-step prompting you to set up different things. For example, if you wanted to create ahead of time 1 or more cover letters, it allows you to do that here. You could set 1 as your default and then have alternatives. I'd probably keep them somewhat generic, and then you can tweak them as needed. You could consider doing possibly one for when you're doing a CMA for a seller versus one for a buyer. So just one of the options here. They also give you a way to set up an agent resume if you want to do that. Now, the company information is something that your beloved broker in charge will need to set up. So you can ask them to set that up for you. And then if they do, that becomes available to you to use. We'll come back to subject property detail, although they tell us that we have two options. They don't give us a preview here. So we'll look at that a little later. As well as some reports. You've got a comp report horizontal and a comp report vertical. And what I like here is that if you know there are certain key fields that you always want to use in your comparisons, you can actually modify them here. When I click on that little click here, if you've done any customizing in Paragon, all the customizable screens look essentially the same. So you have two boxes and then you have some buttons in between. The difference here though is that you can actually compare things not just that have to do with listings, but you can go up to group and you can also choose to look at other things too, like feature categories. So if you want to get more specific, you could. And what you would do here to actually move things over from the left to right is really just simply check a box and click add, and that'll move it here over to the right-hand side. And then of course, if you have made changes, you'll want to make sure to save. So that is a horizontal view. The next slide will be a vertical view, which would be a side-by-side comparison, doing essentially the same thing, choosing the fields that you want to use in your comparisons. Now, they have a report in your CMA presentation called the CMA summary, but I just want to make you aware that it's not the CMA summary report that you're accustomed to seeing perhaps in your green reports box. So this is completely different. It's independent of that one. And so if we make changes here, they only reflect in the CMA presentation, not in that other report that you might use. There's some stats here that you can have displayed. You can create a net sheet ahead of time if you'd like. And of course, all these things are editable as you go through each and every one. And if you want to do your wrap up or final comments, you can do that here as well. They have different decorative backgrounds or themes. So if you wanted to kind of flip through those and have a look, you have different options here available. You can set up a footer, and as you know, a footer is something that would show up at the bottom of every page. So if you choose to do this, maybe it's your real estate tagline. You know, you're a real estate professional for life. I don't think any of you probably use that one, but that's what, you know, I just use as my example, but you know what I'm saying. So you could do that in the footer. You can add your photo, your logo, any of that, if you'd like to have it appear at the bottom of every page. Of course, you always want a disclaimer. You want to indicate that this information is deemed reliable, but not guaranteed. And that is it to those preferences. So if you do take some time to set those things up ahead of time, then you'll just save yourself that much time when you're actually going through the CMA process. So now when we get down to the CMA itself, the first thing that I like to do is to do a search for my subject property to see if it's ever been listed in the MLS. Now, of course, I've chosen a subject property ahead of time, so I know it's in MLS, but I want to show you what I do, how I go about pulling that up, and then using the information to then search for my comps. So what I would normally do is just go to the power search bar at the top left. I use this all the time. I don't know if you are, but I love this kind of search because I can simply put in an address, for example, like the address of my subject, and then you can see that I get several different results here. So this is how many times this particular property has been listed in our MLS. Each time it has a different MLS number. So what I'm looking for is the most current, the most recent MLS number. The higher the number, the more recent it is. So I know that this one that starts 187 is going to be the one that I'll want to look at because it'll have the most recent information. So I'm simply going to click on that. Then I'll have a look at all the information here from when it was last listed. As you can see, it was sold in 2013. This is what it sold for, $221. I'm also interested in maybe looking at the pictures, so I might click on the pictures to just kind of see what condition it was in at that point in time, as opposed to what it might look like now, for example. I also want to see where it's located, square footage, bedrooms, baths, is there a garage or not? And of course, year built. So these are the things I'm focusing in on. And now I want to go over to my search and search for properties that are similar in characteristics and location. So I'm going to go up to my search menu. I'm going to click on residential under search by class. And I had previously put in this criteria just in the interest of time here, but I'm going to show you that criteria and my thought process behind it. If you're not using this feature, I'm getting ready to go up to last search. Last search is extremely powerful. It hangs on to the last 10 sets of search criteria that you've used, whether or not you saved it. So that's a big help, especially when you're logging off quickly and didn't have a chance to save. So the last set of criteria should be the one that I had done previously. And what I'm going to do is walk through the criteria here with you. Starting with status. Now, good idea to show that potential seller what your active competition is, maybe things that are under contract. But as you most likely know, it's the closed properties that we really want to utilize in our actual comparison. And typically speaking, we go back 6 months when we're doing a CMA. So you'll see here, I've got closed status. I went to date range here under closing date, and I chose 6 months back. Easiest way to do that. Then I don't have to fiddle around with calendars and put in dates. It is a detached property, and honestly, if I wanted to, and this is the way I started really, I could have just searched for closed properties in the subdivision that it's located in. That's always a good place to start. Or if you know there are similar properties in other subdivisions nearby, you could include those as well. For this purpose, I didn't use subdivision because I wanted to show you something else. But you can also kind of hone in on what the MLS area and sub area are. I think this is in 7B. And so if I wanted to, I could just search within that little area and sub area. But instead, what I did was a map search, and I'm going to show you that in just a moment. A couple of other things here. I've got a square footage range based on the size of my subject. It's a 4-bedroom home, so I'm doing 4 bedrooms. No master on the first floor, they're all up. 2.5 baths, and it was built in '89, so I'm doing a year built range. I certainly don't want to compare it to new construction or things that are, maybe historic properties, for example. And that is all the criteria I entered in at that point. And then I went to the mapping field. The mapping field is the first field on your search form. But I will also mention that if you look in the upper left of my screen, right next to criteria is a map search tab. And so you can get to the map search either by clicking in that field or clicking the map search tab. Either way is going to take you to this screen. And so what I did here is I essentially asked Paragon to automatically draw me a radius around my subject property. So the way to do that is to go up to the box at the top and type in the address of that subject. And then you'll have to either press your enter key or click that little search icon, because what you want to do is end up with, if you can see that here, a little flag on your map and a little number 1. So that's indicating the subject property. What I did next, after I typed in the address and pressed enter or click the search icon, I went here to the miles box. And for this purpose, I typed in 2 miles and clicked on search radius. There will be times when you need to do more than that, but typically speaking, a 2-mile radius is what you'll be looking for. And when I did that, I came up with 6 different results. And so these are the ones that I'm going to have a better look at. At this point, do you have any questions for me?
Yes, I'm sorry, I missed, what was the date range you used?
The property was built in 1989. I went 5 years below and after that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I think there was one other question earlier in the chat. Someone asked, does Paragon only use closed listings?
So that is really up to you, but generally speaking, whenever you're doing a CMA, it comes down to looking at the closed listings. Anyone can, list a property for whatever they want, but until it actually closes, we don't know what someone is willing to pay for that. So nice idea, again, as I mentioned before, show them what their active competition is, show them what's under contract, maybe even show them what's expired so you can kind of have a discussion about maybe, in your opinion, what went wrong and why it didn't sell, those kinds of things. But I was just stressing that in terms of the actual comparison, you do want to focus on the closed. Anything else, Mary Rachel?
I think that's it, but if anybody wants to unmute themselves, feel free to do that.
Yes, I wanted to ask, those flags, you know how you have that number 1 flag up right now? Sometimes I'll have like several flags up, and I want to know if you can remove the flags.
Yeah, you would actually have to delete the shape as well, or get out of this map search and go back into a map search. Unfortunately, there's no clear button here. That would be helpful, but there isn't.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to recap. So the map search is used to show us comparable properties in that area. Is that how we're going to start picking our comparables?
Yeah, so it's one of the ways that you can pick comparables. The other ways would be, let's say it's in a subdivision, as I mentioned before, you could start there. Look in the subdivision, look in surrounding subdivisions that have similar properties, and you might be able to find comps there. In fact, honestly, that's the way I started my search. But I wanted to show you this alternative. So I took out subdivision and came here. You could use MLS area and sub area. A city, a county, a zip code, that's not going to be narrow enough. So I like these 3 different ways of doing that.
Would you use all 3, or do you have a specific preference?
It really just depends on the subject. If it's in a subdivision, honestly, I always start by searching in the subdivision first to see what's recently closed there, because typically it's going to be similar property. So I normally start there. If I'm not getting results, then I'll try maybe the area and sub area, or I'll do a radius around it. Now, the other thing you can do here is not just a radius, but let's say you knew there were little pockets or little communities around that had properties that would be good comps. So I could go up to the draw icon here, choose a polygon or a rectangle, whatever I'd like, and then I could draw multiple shapes and pull properties from those locations instead. You don't have to just do a radius per se. All right, well, I'm going to head back to the criteria now. I just clicked on that criteria tab in the upper left. If I want to make any changes to my criteria now, I can, but instead I'm going to click search. I'm going to run that search and I'll see my results in the MLS default grid. And in the real world, what I would do is go through each one of them, have a look at the photos, have a look at the listing information, and make sure that I'm on target with what I'm searching for. In this case, I have 3 closed properties, an active and 2 contingents. So I would be interested in looking at all of them. But for the actual CMA, I would choose just the closed. Now, yes, I did look at them ahead of time. So I have the advantage of knowing that they're close in characteristics. And so I am going to choose those properties. Actually, I'll choose all of them and show you something here. I'm going to choose all just by clicking that little checkbox at the top of the list. And then I'm going to go over to my reports box on the right-hand side. This is where you can find all of your available reports in Paragon. And what I'm going to do is go down to the CMA area. And in the CMA area, there are 3 reports. I've actually pulled up 2 of them into my favorite section. When you discover some properties, some reports that you use all the time and you like, you can drag and drop them up to your favorite section as well. Then they're handy and you don't have to go searching for them all the time. So the first one I'm going to click on and show you is the CMA summary. If you just need kind of an overview and analysis, this would be a good option for you. It gives you information, but it also just allows you the freedom to have a conversation about the properties. You'd probably want to give that potential seller the listing sheets for all of the properties that you're discussing. But basically, the information is giving you a lot of clues already. Notice that it's dividing up our report by status. So I'm looking at active, sold, and all pending, which would include contingent, by the way. Here's my sold section, and it's showing me and pulling certain key pieces of information, like how many beds and baths, square footage, days on market, all those kinds of things. And it's showing me, if you'll look with me on the left, the average, min, max, and median values of all of these key fields. And so a good way to start is perhaps to look at these numbers and determine, what you're seeing as maybe a trend or if something stands out to you. You can look at the sold price per square foot. A lot of people are interested in checking that out to see how their subject property might compare. And so this is one way for you to get a feel for what is sold and anything that was active or of any other status for that matter. The other report I'd like to share with you, again, in that green reports box, I also dropped this up into my favorites. This one's called the CMA Quick View. And I like this one because it is a side-by-side comparison. So I can view them right here all together. I can actually control the different property features that it uses in the comparison. So just like many other screens in Paragon, I can go up to Customize, click on Fields, and I can pick and choose fields that I would like to either remove from the right or add from the left. And again, I have under Group, not only the fields that relate to the listing itself, but also fields that relate to agents, or most likely you'd want to use feature categories. So that's another kind of quick option for you to do a side-by-side comparison. Any questions there? Okay, all right. So I'm going to go back to my search results. If you're not familiar with how to navigate back, you never want to use your browser's back button, but you notice over to the right next to my green reports, I have a red back button. I'm going to click that, and that will take me back to each previous report that I was viewing. So here I am at that CMA summary, and if I go back one screen, here I am at my MLS default grid. At this point, I'm only going to have the closed properties selected. So I'm going to uncheck the active and the contingent so that only the 3 closed are selected. And I'm going up to the top left, and I'm going to click on the word checked. And that will just leave me with the ones that I had selected and gets rid of the other ones, just kind of cleans up my screen. So let's say we now want to use these in our CMA presentation. Well, we could have simply started by going to the CMA menu at the top of your screen and started by clicking on Create Presentation. But I know a lot of people actually start by doing the search for comps. So I wanted to illustrate how you can do that, start with the search, and then add them to a new presentation. So at my results here, I'm going across the top to the Actions dropdown. And under the Actions dropdown, I'm going to click on Add to CMA. It assumes that I want those that I've selected, and it also assumes that I am ready to create a new CMA. So I'm just going to click on Select here. And that's going to take me over to the CMA presentation, to the first step. What it wants me to do here is first to give it a name, but before I do that, I just want to point out that you have 2 different ways to navigate through each and every step of this CMA. And really, it's a matter of personal preference. There's a panel here on the left that indicates each of the steps, step 1 through 6, and I can just go through each little area here. Or if you look on the right side of my screen, I have this green Next button. And so if I prefer, I can just continue clicking Next to move me on to each next step. Either way, matter of preference. I tend to just use this panel on the left, but completely up to you. So I'm going to give my presentation a name. Typically speaking, I'll name it with just the address for the property. So I'm going to do that now. And I'm clicking Continue. Then it wants me to set up the subject property, and it's giving me 3 different ways to do that. I'm actually going to start from the bottom and work up. So use the existing MLS listing. We know that this property was listed several times actually in the MLS system. And so if we wanted to, we could actually pull in the last listing data and use that. And that is sometimes helpful. However, we wouldn't be able to modify anything. And we discovered that this property was last sold in 2013, I think it was. And so they may have done some changes to the property since then. So I might want the ability to edit that last criteria and be able to reflect some updates and changes that they've made. So in this case, I'm not going to use this existing MLS number option because it will not let me make any modifications. The next option is to load a subject property. And what they're referring to is when you go up to the CMA menu on your menu bar, you can actually start the whole process of your CMA with the subject first. And so you could click on Add Subject Property and start filling in all the information here regarding it. So if you wanted to do that, or if you had already done that and you want to just pull that in, you can load it that way. Create a new subject property is what we're going to look at in my example. If you have a property that was never listed in the MLS, unfortunately, you won't be able to pull in that information from the tax records. Instead, you would have to fill it in manually. So putting in all the key fields of information. So that is one time that you would use this create new subject property. What we're going to do though is to use it to make a copy of the MLS listing that had been in MLS, because maybe I have some knowledge about updates they did, upgrades, that kind of thing, and I can now reflect better, more accurate information. So I'm clicking there on Create New Subject Property, choosing Residential, and the next screen that comes up, actually, if you've added a listing, will look very familiar to you. So this is your listing input screen, essentially, except for that you don't have to fill in all the red R's. That's nice. So again, if this was a for sale by owner, never been in our database, you would go about addressing some of the basic information here. But what we're going to do is click on Copy Listing. So first, though, you know what? I need to go back to my Power Search where I pulled it up, because I know it's going to require me to put in an MLS number, and I did not jot down that MLS number. So I'm going back. Notice how I still have that tab open. Clicking on Power Search, and I'm going to get that number 1872627. I'm typing it in here and clicking Save. And it is now going to create a copy of that listing. So I'm not touching anyone's listing here, but I do have the ability to edit this copy of it. Now, before I save it, again, just to stress this, I want to go through, have a look at all the information, and make any changes that are appropriate. And so we'll assume that maybe I've done that. And now we're just going to click on Save Subject Property. And that step is done. Next thing it wants us to do, oh, by the way, it does not pull in that primary photo. It's displaying it here on the left for you, but it won't pull it in for you. And in this case, that's probably a good idea because it sold, 7 years ago. So if you'll look with me just above this empty box here, notice how I have Add Edit Photo. So I could take a more recent photo and I could add it that way. And when I click here, it's just like adding pictures to a listing if you've done that before. The next step is to determine who this CMA is for. So Paragon does require you to associate every CMA that you do with a contact. You may have the contact already in your contact list, and if that's the case, then you can just select them. If you don't, you can just click on Create New Contact and put in a name and an email address. I'm just going to choose someone from my contact list. I am going to choose Fred Mertz. The Mertzes and Ricardos were doing some searching together for homes. So now we're going to maybe sell Fred and Ethel's property. So I've associated it with Fred Mertz. Here's his information. And now I move on to the comps. Because we already did the search and because we went up to Actions and Add to CMA, it's pulled them in already for me. They're right here. However, just want to tell you that you can add additional comps by clicking here on Add. It'll let you do it by conducting another search. You can put in an MLS number. If you've dropped some additional comps into a listing cart in Paragon, you can pull those in from that listing cart. And so it does give you a way to add to the current comps that you have. Just clicking back on comps here. And waiting for it to respond. And go back up to client and then click. There we go. So I simply clicked on that green plus sign next to add. At the same time, I can remove any that I now feel are not appropriate to use. And then you get to step 3 for the adjustments. And you can make some calculated adjustments ahead of time, meaning that you can say, okay, for differences in square footage, I want the system to use this dollar value and either add or subtract it to the comp to make it more like the subject property. The only issue I have personally here is that we don't have the ability to do a calculated adjustment on square footage, only on the square footage of the lot. And so I don't find it particularly helpful. However, if I wanted to maybe do some calculated adjustments on some of the features, notice here in the field type, I have the option to change it to features. And so if I wanted to say, hey, whenever they have, I don't know, a deck, you know, account for this amount. Now I know everything's always different, so you may not want to set these up ahead of time, just pointing out that you can if you wanted to. But then you'll go to the actual adjustments area. And if you are making adjustments, it's showing you features here, the subject property here, and the first of your comps right next to it. The final column is where you can make any adjustments up or down to make it more similar to your subject property. And as I'm sure you all know, if your comp is superior, you have to subtract an amount to bring it down to the level of your subject. And if your comp is inferior, you're going to increase it or add an amount to bring it up to your subject property. I don't have any magic numbers for you. I wish I did. I wish there were magic numbers, but you know, it's so different based on so many variables. The materials you use, you know, how much work you're doing, when it was done, the location of the property itself can cause that value to be different. And so this is where your expertise comes into play and why these sellers need you to help them and guide them through this process. Because you have experience perhaps in that specific community, certainly in real estate, and you bring all that knowledge and experience into this equation, and you're kind of the missing piece of it. And so don't let anyone fool you into thinking it's just a matter of putting in a simple number, because that would mean they don't need you, and they do. So a couple of things here. Property features, you can modify those. So I can go up to fields at the top. Looking familiar, right? These screens look familiar. Yeah. So if I wanted to remove anything that's currently there, I don't need it perhaps in this comparison. I can simply click on it and I can move it back over to the left-hand side. And likewise, I can choose things here from the left, select them, click add. And that way they'll show up in my comparison here. And so you would go through, make any adjustments that you saw fit. And then above that, the red buttons are how you're going to get to each next comp and do the very same thing.
Can I ask a quick question? When you actually, if you had to make an adjustment, you're putting in a dollar amount there, or are you just putting in a plus or minus? Like if you had to make an adjustment to bedrooms?
Yeah, so if you're making adjustments, you're going to put a minus sign when you need to, but you don't have to put in a plus sign, it's implied. You just put in the number.
So you just go over to adjustments and put in the minus sign?
I'm sorry?
You're saying you just go over to that adjustment box? Like I just want to see what, when you click on one of those boxes.
Oh, sure, okay. So if I did like, I don't know, I'm making up something, of course.
Yeah, okay, you just do the minus, okay.
I do, and then it's going to also give me an adjusted sales price. The regular sales price for this one that we're looking at is $320, but taking off $5 grand has adjusted that price to $315.
Okay, just want to see how you would, yes, I just want to see what you were typing in the adjustments, like if you were doing
and
that
honestly,
minus or plus.
That was a poor example because in this case, I didn't even look at the square footage. In this case, the comp is smaller, right? So I would actually have added some kind of value. So sorry if that confused you. I wasn't looking at the square footage.
Lynn?
Right.
Lynn?
Yes.
Can I ask a quick question right
Of
along this
course.
line? When looking at the living space, I've been told by more than one appraiser that for one, never include a property that's more than 15% plus and minus the living space of the subject. But within that 15%, I can do some adjustments, but to always take 50% of the differential, or well, like I got 35% of the differential, or take 50% after you take out the value of the land. Is that along the lines with what you've learned, or is maybe there another approach to this?
No, actually, that is what I've been told also by appraisers. So if I were to give any advice, that advice seems reasonable from an appraiser. They do this all the time. I just don't have personal experience to give you advice on that. But yes, I'll agree with you. That's exactly what I've heard from appraisers. Anything else that you guys want to ask about at this point? Okay, I'm gonna go
Lynn,
on to,
I'm
oh,
sorry.
sure, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I hate to seem so ignorant about this, but when I'm doing this alongside you, I'm not coming up with the full baths, the half baths, the bedrooms. I'm
Right,
getting
and
real
that's
basic.
because you go up to fields
Okay,
and you'll need to add those things.
got it.
So
Okay,
yeah, because I'm in this feature a bit, I'll add and remove things kind of randomly just to illustrate. And so mine does not reflect what the default is at all.
got it. Okay, thank you.
All right, step 4, page layout. We can choose a theme other than the one that we set as our default. If we want to use something else in this case, we can. If we want to use that footer that we've set up, we can click here and include it. Or if we don't want to include it, we can simply uncheck that box and it won't show up. And of course, we always want to keep that disclaimer at the bottom of every page. So step 5 is where you get down to kind of the nuts and bolts, the nitty gritty of it, where you're going to choose the different pages that you want included in your presentation. And for each of these, they do have a preview. I'm just clicking on subject property detail, for example. And I have the ability to preview each of those pages to see whether or not it's something that I want to include. And I am just looking at the clock on my computer and realizing that I need to get moving here. So in the interest of time, yeah, and honestly, I could spend hours on this with you folks. So come back and take a little bit longer CMA class with me. I'd love to have you. But these are all the report pages you could potentially include. You want to check mark anything appropriate. And also just want to mention at the very bottom left here of my screen, Paragon gives you the ability to upload additional documents. So if you have any PDFs you want to include, you can do that. I'm just going to skip on to step 6, and that is to run the CMA, generate that report. And based on check marks that I had in place previously, this is what this presentation is looking like. And that's it for the one in Paragon. So let me now hop on over to Realist and show you the comp analysis there. We're going to use the same subject property. I'm going up to the tax menu. You now have another option in terms of a tax resource, and that's CRS. They have a good comp analysis as well, and so I'll be teaching that in the future. So I hope you'll tune in for that. But I'm going to go into Realist, which is what many of you have already used. And on the first screen under the quick search, I'm going to simply click here and type in the address for my subject. Whoops, spelling counts. There we go. And I'm going to click this search button, and it will pull up that realist property report. So it is showing me all the information, like who owns it, the location, tax-related information. One other thing that Realist does, let me get here for you, is an AVM. They call it real AVM, and this is what it approximates the value to be. It's just an approximation, just an opinion. So we don't necessarily go by that. All right. I just wanted to share that with you though, because now across the top, I'm going to go to the comparables. When I click on the comparables tab, it's pulling up some comps for me, and that is based on any search criteria that I have previously set up. And I want to show you how you can manipulate that in case you want to change your mind at different points. And so if you look with me first over to the right, you'll see search criteria. I'm clicking on that. And this is the search criteria it's basing those comps on. So I said, show me and return 5 comps. I could have said, show me 50 if I wanted to. I can choose the sort method. I can choose to include or exclude that real AVM. I want the data source to be both from the MLS and from tax records. And initially, I believe it was 0.75 miles distance from the subject. I changed mine to 2. I also went a little further down under the time period. It was set to 9 months. I set mine to 6. I have my square footage differential for both the property, the home, and the lot set to that 15%. And then I just had land use set same as subject. If you wanted to make changes, or you did make some and you want to remember them, you'll click on Save and Submit. If you want to just use it for this one-time use, you'll just click the Submit button. And that'll take you back to the screen where it's showing us a split screen of the location of our comps with these little markers here on the map. The black marker indicates our subject, and then here are our 5 comps here. If you'll follow me down to the bottom right, that's where I'm going to click to generate the comp report. So once again, we have a map on the top. It has our search criteria that we used. If we don't want that to display, we can collapse any of these little areas by clicking that little arrow so it doesn't display. It gives us some statistics, this time including a lot more information, and then a side-by-side comparison. Our subject property here against the comps. Now, nowhere does it actually recommend a price, so it is more for information. The only sort of suggestion would be that real AVM, but of course, ultimately it's up to you. But it's just another option to see those comps pulled and to see them laid out. So now I'm going to go on to RPR.
How close do you
Yeah,
feel
go ahead.
How close do you feel that the AVM is usually, I mean, is there a percentage that it's within, or?
So they use multiple algorithms to come up with the AVM. I don't know what those different algorithms are. And that's why, because we don't know how it's determined, I think it's interesting information, but I wouldn't, put my full trust in it. That's where you have to come into play. And that's why it's often a good idea to do what we're doing now, to try it different ways and to see how close or far apart those numbers are. So we start in Paragon, we took a quick look in Realist, and then I'll go over to RPR and see what they have as well. So I'm going to do that now. I already had RPR open. If you've not used this program before, this is, again, a database that was established by the National Association of Realtors. Because of your membership and affiliation with them, you have access to it. There's no additional charge. It is a nationwide database as well, so keep that in mind. When you go to narrpr.com, it will ask you to create an account. And so you'll do that. And then once you have set up your account with your login credentials, you'll then log in and arrive at this screen. All searching is done from this blue box here at the top. And so what I'm going to do is make sure it's on an all properties search, and I'm going to click in here and type in that subject property address again. I don't know why I don't want to type out my L's today. All right, here we go. 9301 Glade Clove. Going to click that search icon, and it's going to pull up the property report. Lots and lots of information in RPR. Not really enough time to go through everything with you. Going to hit the highlights with you and walk through that comp analysis process. At the top here, they have also an AVM that they call the RVM, and this is what their RVM has established as the value. Underneath that, if we want to see the properties that they use to come up with that valuation, we can click on View Details and it'll show us the properties exactly that it used. To the right of that, I want to mention that you have an opportunity to refine the value of the subject property. So let's say that you know they've done certain improvements. They got all new siding or a new roof or remodeled a bathroom, those kinds of things. You can actually increase the value or refine that value that way. And I do want to show you that in just a second. Just want to scroll down the rest of the screen first so that you can see the other information that it gives. Different home facts on it. So all that information that you would expect. Also has a lot of information here on the right-hand side to dig into, which we won't have time to do today. But I'm going to go to Refine. And Refine lets me refine the value on several different things. So first of all, I can change the basic facts if I know they are incorrect. So if the number of bedrooms or square footage, that kind of thing was wrong, I could change it here. But here is where I can refine the value based on a home improvement. Let's say they did a bathroom remodel, a mid-range bathroom remodel. So this is this comes from Metro Steady. It's a Handley Wood company. They are a national firm that comes up with approximate values for construction costs and also for any kinds of improvements. And it's done by region. So this would be specific to our region of the country. And so it would be one way for you to come up with approximate values for things when we say that there's not really a magic number. This is not necessarily a magic number, but at least it gets you in the ballpark of how it would make that adjustment. Let me show you. So I'm adding this bathroom remodel. I'm just going to say that it was completed in May of this year. And they spent $10,000 on it. So when I click add, notice what it does. It doesn't give me the full 10,000 value. It estimates it at just over 7,000. And what it does here, the original RVM that it had come up with is now refined and now is this estimate. And I can continue to do that for any other known improvements that the sellers may have made. Likewise, if it's in need of some kinds of repair or improvement, maybe it's just a mess, it needs a new roof, you could put in new roof and what it would cost for that, and click add, And now you can see that it'll take away from that original estimate or RVM that RPR had come up with. Any questions on that? All right, just to scroll down just a little bit further, the other thing you can refine on, and this is of course more subjective, but our market conditions. Are we in a very hot market? Well, that'll adjust things. The exterior condition, interior condition, those kinds of things. And so you can use these sliding scales to refine by those. I'm going to just simply restore mine to the original estimate. And because I just wanted to illustrate that to you. And now I'm going to go over to that comp analysis. So if you'll look with me across the top here, right next to refined value, I have comp analysis. And there are actually two different CMAs that you can create. We're going to do the comparative analysis, which is going to be kind of the shorter version, if you will. The sales comparison analysis is more in depth. It's more along the lines of what an appraiser might use. And one of the main differences between the two of them is that when it comes to making adjustments, the one that we're going to look at, that comparative analysis, is making it sort of arbitrarily for you. So based on a slider that you say is the comp is better or worse, it's going to add or remove a certain value from that. And the difference between that and the sales comparison is you get item by item the ability to put in your specific adjustment. So this is the one that most people are using right now. It's the one that their system defaults to. So I want to just walk you through that, but know that you have another option. 5 steps here. And first step is they want us to make sure that the home facts are accurate. So it's asking us to confirm those. Anything with an asterisk has to be addressed, okay? And so if you don't see anything in the public record data or the in MLS data, then you'll want to make that change here and indicate it in this column on the right-hand side. And so if you know things are glaringly wrong, you update them here. And at the bottom, I'm just going to click on Confirm Facts and Close. So we've done step 1. Step 2 is searching for comps. I'm going to click on Find Comps. And if you'll look at the top under step 2, it's actually giving me 2 ways to go about this. It's set to do a search for an area to pull our comps from. But there's also an option here to add a known property. What I like about Paragon compared to RPR is that you have a lot more specific criteria that you can use and search on. So I often, if not always, do a search first in Paragon. And sometimes RPR and Paragon don't come up with the exact same properties. And this allows me to add a property that I want to use. So if I have a comp and I know the address or the MLS number from Paragon, I can put it in here, click add, and I can use that in my comparison. So I find that very helpful. I'm going back to the search portion of it, and you'll see it here on the left-hand side. It's including actives and pendings. I mean, you can certainly include those as well. We know that we need to really look at the solds. It has a keyword search. And then other than that, this is the criteria that you can enter in. It does use by default a pretty broad range for things like square footage. 1,400 to 2,400 I think is too broad and should be narrowed down. But just for illustrative purposes, I'll leave it at what they have so you can see the comps that they come up with. And to do that, I'm going to click the search button. It's finding 20 properties. I can look at the full property report for any of these by clicking on an address. It gives me the basic information along here. And then if I want to use it as one of my comps, I can just check the box here on the right-hand side, and it adds it to that panel. If I want to remove it, there's a remove from comps, and I can say, yes, I'm sure I want to remove it. Well, if I scroll down a little bit, you'll notice that there are some here that have a blue star next to them. Those are properties that RPR actually used in coming up with the RBM. So if I wanted to use those, if I were in agreement with those, I could simply just select the ones with the blue star. But in any event, you would want to take your time, look through all the properties, and decide on that. Once you have chosen your comps, you click Update Valuation and Close. And then the next step will allow you to make adjustments. Now, again, keep in mind that it's using this sliding scale. So as I use the slider, it's arbitrarily adding or subtracting an amount. So just know that that's how it is going to handle those adjustments. And if you're not comfortable with that, then I would not use the adjustment piece here, or maybe switch over to the other CMA that's available. So you can make adjustments if you care to. Come back here to step 4, which is where you're going to put in your suggested price to them. So you can enter in a value or a range. And then the last step is to create that report. So for a comp analysis, RPR is going to default to a report called a seller's report. If you wanted to have a look at it, there's a show sample that'll run through a little slideshow for you so you can see and get a feel for what it looks like. I will share with you that this report is at least 75 pages. And so you probably don't want to keep all those pages in it. And so what I would recommend doing is clicking on more details, which will show you the individual elements of this report. Also giving you a way to hover over that little eye bubble to see exactly what that page would look like or what kind of information it's including. And then go through all of these and uncheck anything that you don't find necessary or appropriate. And that will definitely make that report that you're doing more comprehensive. If I had made notes along the way, if I had done a seller's net sheet, I could choose to include those if I wanted to. If I want to email this, I can put in an email address here. Otherwise, I am clicking on Run Report and do that now. It takes a couple of minutes for it to generate. And when it does, it'll ring a little doorbell to let me know it's ready. But while it's being prepared, are there questions that you'd like to ask?
Yes, how did you get to that site again, please?
It's narrpr.com. If you look in my address bar here, narrpr.com. And you'll just click on Create Account.
Hello, Lynn.
Yes.
Sorry, this is Maggie.
Hey, Maggie.
Back to the previous page, when you pick up the comparisons, the little blue spot is come up. What does that mean?
That blue star indicates a property that RPR used in coming up with its RBM, its valuation of the property.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
While we're waiting, I'll just point out that at the top here under reports, you can see that it is working on generating that seller's report for me. And again, when it's ready, it's going to ring a bell and we can download it.
Is there a point when you're looking at homes that are sold for sale by owner?
Yeah, so you can see those as well. It'll pull from tax records or MLS data, like in Realist. I don't know if you remember when I went into the search criteria for that little report, it gave me the option to pull from tax or from just the MLS. But in Paragon, of course, we're not going to have the ability to pull things that were for sale by owner because we are in MLS and it's just our MLS records in there.
Is it better to pull, you know, from Paragon or RPR? It seems easier in RPR for sure.
It's easier because there's fewer fields of criteria. But as I mentioned, I like to do my search in Paragon. Keep in mind though, I don't do what you guys do. So you have to bring your experience and knowledge and expertise into it and decide what's best. I'm doing it kind of from the ivory tower, if you will, even though I've kind of sort of been in the business for a while. I don't do what you guys do on a regular basis. I personally prefer the Paragon search, but really completely up to you.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And this is what the report would look like. Oh, I do want to mention at the top here, it's saying Triangle MLS, but that's because RPR gives you the ability to brand. And so you can indicate the company, or the broker in charge can indicate your firm with your company's logo, that kind of thing. So this is just my company logo. This is my firm, if you will. I won't have a chance to go through every page, but I do want to just kind of scroll through some of these for you. It makes some very good, I believe, reports, very clean, easy to look at, professional looking. I actually prefer the reports in RPR over the ones in Paragon, but again, that's my personal preference. If you have someone who is numbers minded, they'll love this because there's lots of statistical information that you can include and give to them. And so those are just three of the options that you have available to you right now today to use at no extra fee to you to create a comp analysis. And that concludes that session. Any final thoughts or questions for me?
Hi, Lynn. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
I have a quick question going back to the CMA summary report.
Okay.
I like to do that and send it to my clients.
Mm-hmm.
And is there a way when you email that to them that they can also see the pictures of the house?
You would have to actually send not only the CMA summary, but also the buyer full report for each one of those properties in order for them to see it.
The buyer full report.
Yeah, and that's the default report that the system assumes that you want to send anyhow.
Oh, yeah.
So you would send that plus CMA summary.
So it'd be two separate emails.
Nope, all in one email. And on the left-hand side, when they're looking at that email, they'll get to toggle between which report they want to view.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else, folks?
Thank you so much, Lynn, for your time and expertise. We are getting such good feedback in the chat. Christy Robertson's also in the class today answering some questions, so feel free to scroll through that, and we'll definitely try and get some more classes going on, but they offer tons of training on their end. And our next Power Hour is going to be on Monday, the 21st, with Mark Given, and it is Build Your Business to Sell Your Business. So please take a look at the RRAR website and register for that. And thank you all so much for being here today.
Hi, can I just ask a quick question?
Mm-hmm.
Can you repeat the appraiser rule of thumb by taking out the land value?
They usually do allow for a 15% differential. And if possible, they recommend to not use comps that are outside of that 15% differential. So,
right, but then you said something about you can, with the land value, if you take that out, something.
So, and then they don't factor, they factor about 35% of it, of the value per square foot. So you will have to do a little calculation there. Now, that's just what I have been told by appraisers. I don't know if that's what other agents, your peers, people who have been in the business a long time are using, but that is what I had heard.
No, I've heard that too. I totally agree.
Yeah.
But then there was another part about the land, if the land value or something, it kind of beeped out there for a while.
The what? I'm sorry?
There was something about a land value. If you take out the land value, it kind of beeped out a little bit there.
No, I'm not familiar with anything to do with land value.
Okay, beeping out a little bit. Okay, all right. Thank you so much. It was wonderful.
You're very welcome. Anything else? Well, there are lots of questions here in the chat. I'll try to get to some of these.
Hi, Lynn. I have a quick question.
Sure.
You need to send the seller report as well as the buyer report.
So in, you're referring to RPR, the
Yes.
last one we used?
Yes.
So in RPR, there are lots of different kinds of reports. So you could do a property report, a market activity. This one's called a seller's because it is typically used for a CMA that you're doing for a seller. You could do just a property report. These are the different elements to that. And again, you could include the subject property, which might be the property that they're thinking about making an offer on. So you can use this for buyer or seller.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, RPR is a national database. And every MLS that chooses to participate in it also gets to choose what kind of information that they want to share. In an RPR class, Christy or I can show you that, but every MLS gets to decide whether they just want to show you active information or closed and historical information. I think most of these we have addressed. If you are interested in taking more classes, you can just go to trianglemls.com and log into the portal and then click on the calendar. Likewise, we also have the training schedule a week at a time, typically, right on the homepage for Paragon. So if you were in Paragon, you go to the homepage, you'd be able to see the classes here. So unless you have anything else, I'm going to sign off now. Let's see if there's anything else.
Thank you, Lynn.
You're so welcome. Mary Rachel, are you guys recording? I assume you are.
We are recording, and it will be housed on the RRAR website under webinars on demand.
Perfect. That's the answer to your question. Someone just asked that in the chat. All right. Well, thanks again for having me. Look forward to maybe doing this another time on another topic.
This is great. Oh, they want it. They want you back.
All right. You take care now.
Okay.
Thanks, Lynn.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye. Have a good day.